Hello, I'm Bob Harris. Welcome to Duraamen's educational series for industrial and decorative concrete flooring systems. This video series, we're going to talk about the application of microcement over porcelain or ceramic tile. So the first consideration when going over tile is to make sure that the tile is in fact sound. We don't want to have any delaminating tiles. One way to find out if you have any tiles that are delaminated is do a simple chain drag. And all of this tile seems to be adhering into the thin set mortar, but if you had a tile that was delaminated, you'll hear a different tone. It'll be a much lighter tone by using the chain. In addition, we've got some high areas that you see here. If we're using a micro cement, the term micro means very thin. Obviously, if we to go micro cement over this, you could potentially get some ghosting of the high ridges. So we'll want to grind these areas flush and obtain the proper CSP, concrete surface profile. So on a small area like you see here, or perhaps a kitchen or a bathroom, we're going to be using a dust-free 7-inch grinder with a segmented diamond cup wheel, and we'll go ahead and get it all leveled and get our proper surface profile. On a larger application, perhaps it's 1,000 square feet or more, it's acceptable to use a planetary walk-behind grinder to go ahead and level and get that concrete surface profile to the necessary requirements. Once we've obtained our proper CSP, concrete surface profile, everything's flush and level, we're going to get into our complete system. The goal is to put down the Uberdek microcement followed by the Skraffino microcement, with our end goal being pretty much a trowel-free surface. A lot of systems in terms of microcements, when they put it down with a magic trowel or a hand trowel, a common complaint is, wow, we see these trowel ridges or these trowel lines. In this system, we're hopefully going to reduce or eliminate those unsightly trowel marks or ridges. So one of the things we're going to start with is the Param FP fast setting fiber reinforced feather patch. But it's a good idea, once the surface has been cleaned, to pre-prime it with CP1000. By taking the glaze off of the tile, it's a very porous profile, probably a CSP of about 3. And so it is a good idea to go ahead and pre-prime the tile first with CP1000. And once that's tack-free or dry, we move on to the next step, which is the application of the Param FP. It is a fast-setting fiber reinforced feather patch that will skim coat all of the joints that you see here. And once that's dry, we'll check it to make sure we don't have any ridges. If we have any little nibs or ridges, we'll go ahead and scrape that and then vacuum that, and then it's ready for the next step. And the next step is going to be to apply CP1000 over the Param FP. And we give that the sufficient amount of dry time. On any of the Duraamen products, they provide the technical data sheets, so make sure you adhere to the drying time requirements, which are listed in all of the tech data sheets. Once the CP1000 has had sufficient curing time, we'll come back with the Uberdek, which is the multi-purpose concrete resurfacer. It has a little bit of a sand grain to it, which is great because we're going to use that graininess or that sand to our advantage. And it's going to allow us to apply the Skraffino microcement to the proper depth of application. And that's the key to this system, to putting a trowel down system that's free of the trowel lines or the ridges. And this is the key, by first installing the Uberdek because of the coarseness of it. Once the Param FP has had sufficient cure time, we're going to go ahead and re-prime with CP1000. When it's dry to the touch or tack-free, we're going to install our Uberdek system, which is also mixed with CP1000. So once the CP1000 over the top of the Param FP has had dry time where it's tack-free, we're going to install our Uberdek. We'll get into the mixing requirements a little bit later in the video when it's time to mix the product up. Once the Uberdek has been installed, we're going to go ahead and give that sufficient curing time, which is typically maybe 5 or 6 hours, depending on the ambient and substrate temperatures. And then if you have any trowel lines or any ridges or any imperfections, give it a light sanding, and then we'll clean that off, and then it's time to prime again with CP1000. Once the CP has had sufficient dry time where it's tack-free, and we're ready to go on to our Skraffino Superfine installation over the top of the dry Uberdek. And that's the key to this system, to getting a system that's free of trowel ridges or voids. So it's a really unique system, and I think the Uberdek is the key to the success of a trowel-free micro cement. So you can also talk about the coloring of both the Uberdek and the Skraffino Superfine. You can intricately color with either Aquacolor or the Color Fast pigment in either of the two systems. You can also color after the fact, as far as with the Color Fast. Once the final coat of Skraffino Superfine has been put down, you can use this as a stain as well. So once you have your desired texture and your desired color, assuming that you're going to pre-stain it after the fact, now it's time to talk about sealers. So when you seal, we're going to start with what I call a prime coat of the Purdue A03, which is a water-based acrylic, which you see right here. That's the Purdue A03, and that goes down and has sufficient cure time. Like I've talked about in previous videos, check the Duraamen technical data sheets for all of the appropriate drying times and mix ratios for the products. So once we've installed the A03 water-based acrylic as our prime coat over the Skraffino Superfine, we're going to come back with the E32 water-based epoxy. And then once that's dry, we finish it off with the Purdue U45 or the Purdue U46. Now, the Purdue U45 is a matte finish, and the 46, the U46, is a gloss. Both water-based epoxy, but you're always going to use that as your final wear surface. So if it's a commercial type of application, a lot of people will ask, well, gosh, do we need the 3 applications of sealer? The A03, followed by the E32, followed by the water-based polyurethane. In a commercial application, yes, you do need all 3 applications. However, if it's a residential or just light foot traffic, you could eliminate the E32 water-based epoxy and just install the A03 water-based acrylic, followed by the Purdue U45. So what we're going to do, we talked about the proper profile. We're going to get busy and start profiling our surface, knocking the highs and the lows down, and then once that's complete, we'll clean the surface and we'll skim coat the entire surface with our Param FP. In some scenarios, we have porcelain or ceramic tile that's been installed over a wood subbase, like plywood, for example. And perhaps there's a little bit of deflection, like we've talked about in previous videos. In that instance, we're going to change up our application techniques a little bit to account for the deflection. The preparation would be the same in terms of the sanding, like we've described, using the Param FP. All of that's the same. The only difference is we would want to embed the spider lath, the 4.4, which is the finer gauge and the tighter mesh, into the system. And so we would be using the Purdue E02 epoxy for that. And generally what we'll do is, you can see the width of this roll. We would roll out the epoxy a little bit wider than that roll. So in other words, it would look something like this. We would roll epoxy a couple of inches past that, and then we would embed the spider lath 4.4 gauge into the wet epoxy, and then we would back roll the mesh or the spider lath into that epoxy. And then once that's dry, or before it's dry, we would broadcast dry silica sand, generally like a 20-30 mesh silica sand, to refusal into the wet epoxy. And then that dries, and then we come back several hours later or the next day, and we vacuum the residual sand. And then once that's clean, we come back over the top of the dry sand that's been embedded into the epoxy with the spider lath, and we prime it with the CP1000. Once we've done that with the CP1000 as a primer, we follow all of the steps that we've previously talked about with installing the Uberdek, sanding it, priming it, going with the Skraffino Superfine, and then on from there. As we previously talked about, it's time to profile our ceramic tile. We're using a 7-inch hand grinder attached with a dust extraction. We're going to be using a segmented cup wheel to grind this, and our goal is to obtain the right CSP, concrete surface profile, as well as level any out of level tile joints, and we'll get going on that. Like we've talked about, the importance of safety, proper ear protection, eye protection, and knees, and so we'll get busy with our grinding. All right, that took us about roughly 10 minutes to get our profile. You can see in the middle of the tile where it's much darker, that's a function of those tiles were intentionally set out of level to show you we're trying to level. What we didn't get with the grinder, we've got a great profile that's, I can feel that there's texture and porosity, which all of our primers and our FP is going to soak right in, no problem. But any out of level joints that the grinder didn't get, we're going to make it up with our Param FP feather patch. So from here, we're going to go ahead and vacuum this. Once it's clean, install a coat of CP1000 primer, and once that's tack-free or dry to the touch, we'll move right onto our FP system. All right, we demonstrated the grinding and profiling of the ceramic tile, leveled the joints. You saw us vacuum, and now we're applying our prime coat of CP1000 primer prior to the FP feather patch installation. Once this CP1000 is dry to the touch and tack-free, we will then skim coat the entire surface of the tile, which obviously includes the joints, but the whole tile too, and that's going to account for any high or low spots. And then once the FP system is dry, we'll go ahead and reprime the FP with CP1000 and then move on to our Uberdek installation and then on from there. On a larger application, it is acceptable to go ahead and put the CP1000 in a pump sprayer, and you can spray apply it as long as you have somebody back rolling right behind the sprayer. All right, that's the application of our CP1000. I did roll one way, and then I cross-rolled the opposite direction or the opposing direction just to ensure that I got good coverage of CP1000 and I didn't miss any areas. Just a footnote, as I'm putting CP1000 down, whether it's on tile or on existing concrete that's been ground, I'm always watching the dry pattern to see how absorbent this material is. And I have to be honest, this porcelain tile with the ground finish that we just accomplished, profiling the tile, it's totally absorbing this material, which is yet another reason it was a good idea to back roll. So in essence, we're getting really almost 2 coats of the CP1000 within one application, if that makes sense. So once this is tack-free, dry to the touch, where we're not lifting any material or it doesn't come off on our hands or fingers, it's time to put the Param FP down, skim coat the entire surface, and move on to our next application. On our ceramic tile application, our application of CP1000 has thoroughly dried. Now it's time to move on to the next step, which is the application of our Param FP. So this 40-pound bag, basically it's 1.25 gallons of water that would, assuming that you're mixing the whole bag. But on an area this small, we're not going to mix the whole bag, so we've kind of broken down the quantities incrementally. Keep in mind, you want to mix material that you're capable of getting onto the floor. Oftentimes I'll see installers make way too much of a feather patch material like this, and it's taking them too long to get the material down. Meanwhile, it's starting to set up in the bucket. So it's perfectly okay to mix smaller quantities and kind of move along. And then we'll let that dry and then move on to our next step. So we're going to go ahead and mix up our Param FP. Looks good to me. All right, we're ready to go to the next step on our porcelain tile installation. Just a brief recap. We used the Param FP and we covered the entire surface, filling the grout joints. Oftentimes we're presented with the question, do we always have to use the FP? And the answer is no. We could have went with, not went with the FP and went right straight to Uberdek. And the consideration there is if the joints are nice and tight. So that's where you would just go straight to Uberdek if the grout joints were nice and tight. But because the grout joints were wide and we had a little deviation in terms of elevation, we had to go with the FP here. And so now what we're doing is we're about ready to put the primer down, the CP1000. Just a word of caution, sometimes you may need to screen or sand the surface. It's really dependent on how you've troweled the material down. If there's no trowel lines or any highs or lows, we're good to go with the application straight to the CP1000. However, if we had some trowel ridges or any harsh edges, we would need to sand this. It just depends on the conditions as far as the grit. Anywhere between an 80 grit to a 150 sanding screen with a rotary buffing machine is usually the most expeditious way. Vacuum the residual dust and then go ahead and apply your CP1000. So we're going to go ahead and just, because the area is small, we're going to roll on our application of the CP1000. On a larger application, it is acceptable to put the CP1000 in a pump-up sprayer. And while one person is spraying, you can have a second person just following right behind with a quick back roll. And then the drying time is, once the material is tack-free, you're ready to go on to the next step, which in this case is going to be our Uberdek. I will say that if you skipped the FP because the joints are tight, you're gonna still need the 2 coats of Uberdek. So you'd still be putting 2 applications of Uberdek down prior to the last application of the Skraffino Superfine. Oftentimes we get asked the question, is it mandatory to prime, or why do you prime? And the answer is you should prime the surfaces for a couple of reasons. It's going to extend the working time of the material that you're putting down. In this case, we're putting Uberdek down. So you do want to prime because it'll extend the working time, but also it's going to reduce or eliminate pinholing. And we refer to that as outgassing. So it is a good idea to prime in between steps for a couple of reasons, like we just mentioned. All right, our CP1000 has had sufficient cure time over the top of the FP, and now it's time to mix our Uberdek. Uberdek is packaged in 40-pound bags, as you see right here, and the mix ratio is 6.5 liters of CP1000 to a 40-pound bag of the Uberdek. So in addition, what we did is we want to tint the material, so we used Aquacolor, and we used the color putty. So what we did is we put our colorant into the CP1000 and Chris gave it a spin. So you want to make sure that if you're doing multiple batches, let's say you're putting a 10-bag job down, that you're putting the same exact amount of colorant every time so we have color consistency. Keep in mind, cement-based products react and set up quicker the warmer the temperatures get. So if you're working outside, we do have some installers that basically make much smaller batches, with the fear being if we make a whole batch of 40 pounds to the 6.5 liters, you may not be able to get it down before it starts setting. So to remedy that, you can make smaller batches. So some of the installers will take 64 ounces of powder, and then they'll take roughly 64 ounces of CP1000. So as a basic ratio, they'll go 1 to 1. You may need to alter the CP1000 2 to 3 ounces either way. So perhaps you might go down to 61, 62 ounces or up to 66 or 67 ounces. So there's a little leadway there depending on the temperature of the material, obviously. And the logic is if you're making small batches, you keep a wet edge during the whole installation. So you might want to consider that. You're going to mix for a minimum of 3 to 4 minutes to make sure it's a cohesive, consistent viscosity of the material. Like with all of the Duraamen applications, you must keep the substrate clean. You can see our porcelain tile here is ready to go. It looks awesome, so I'll put on slip-on booties prior to stepping onto the surface, and with that, we're going to go ahead and mix our batch of Uberdek. To clarify, we mixed our Uberdek. Now, we only made a half batch. We didn't make the full bag because we only have a given area here that we're covering. There's a variety of ways that you can put the Uberdek down. You can use your traditional hand trowel. Some people like a magic trowel. On a large job, you could use a stand-up squeegee, something similar to this. This is a little bit too small of an area, but this works really, really nicely, putting it down consistent. So we'll go ahead and show a couple techniques here. Okay. Make sure you get all your edges consistent. So that's basically the hand troweling. If you choose to, you can come in with a magic trowel, which really lays it down nicely as well. So you'll notice with the technique, every pass I make, I'll come over here and I clean my magic trowel each time. All right. All right, that's our Uberdek installation. This material goes down at approximately a coverage rate of right around 300 square feet per bag of material. Of course, it depends on the texture of the concrete or the surface that you're going over, but it lays down beautifully. This could actually be considered a final wear surface. Remember, you're always going to put at least 2 coats of the Uberdek down. Some applicators prefer to just drag a broom across it for a broom finish for restoration of concrete exterior. For our video series here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use Skraffino Superfine after we put the CP1000. So this material will dry. We'll put a coat of CP down, and then once that's dry, we'll go over it with the Skraffino Superfine. Our Uberdek has been drying for about 4 hours, 4.5 hours, and now what we're doing is we're applying CP1000 just prior to our installation of Skraffino Superfine. So in conditions like today, the CP1000 is probably going to need to dry for about 45 minutes to make sure it's not tacky at all. One other thing on the Uberdek, it really is a function of how the installer puts it down as far as it needing sanding. So if you have any trowel ridges or any high spots, you're going to need to sand that. Like we've talked about on past videos, the grit depends on the hardness of the material. So somewhere between a 100 grit and or 80 grit to 150 to sand it, and then you would vacuum the residual dust and then go back with your CP1000 like we're applying right now. Our CP1000 is dried over the top of our Uberdek. Now we're going to go with our application of Skraffino Superfine, and the mix ratio for this is it's a 20-pound pail. In this material is 20 pounds of material, and then we're going to go 4 to 4.6 liters of CP1000. Since we're doing a smaller sample, kind of like we showed one video series how to make samples, we're making a smaller batch so we don't ruin a whole bucket of material. So we have in here 1 liter of CP1000, and then we have 5 pounds of the Skraffino Superfine. Also, we're going to tint with Aquacolor using putty. So the first thing we'll do is we'll mix into the CP1000. Mix that up, and then we'll go ahead and once I've stirred this with the mixing drill, we'll slowly start mixing our powder, our Superfine, into the CP1000. Our coverage rate is, depending on the substrate, somewhere between 350 to 400 square feet per bucket of material once it's mixed. And we're going to demonstrate a couple different varieties of how you put it down. We have a new kind of interesting configuration of a trowel that we'll use. We'll have the traditional pool trowel and also the magic trowel. It gets down to your personal preference and your confidence level in terms of the tool that you use to put it down. So normal mixing time is approximately 3 to 4 minutes. We're mixing a smaller batch, so we'll probably be fine with 2 to 3 minutes mixing here. All right. Yep, just go right over there. Yes, sir. Now, a common mistake I see applicators make is they'll take a bucket like that, dump the whole thing on the floor. You don't want to do that. Why would I want to have to move all of that material all the way to the end? So Chris dumped the perfect amount. So we just want to dump what we need on the floor, and as you advance, then dump more. So don't dump a whole big pile of material that you're going to have to end up moving. So once again, just demonstration purposes, you've got this little trowel that if you choose to use, pretty nifty. If you make it more of a paste, like this is kind of a little bit of a thinner consistency, which is really nice. But you can use this little trowel and give it something like this technique, or like we had demonstrated before, you could just come in with the larger trowel, which puts it down really quick. Or come back with a magic trowel, which really lays it down nice. All right, I'll take some more, please. Yes, sir. Thank you. Notice how I clean my trowel every time back here. Okay. Looks like just the right amount again, huh? That was the application of our Skraffino Superfine. Now what we're going to do is, prior to sealing it, typically you want to let this dry or cure a minimum of 8 to 12 hours, which means the next day. If in a damp environment like a basement, or if you have cool temperatures, you might want to let it dry a little bit longer, possibly a day and a half prior to sealing it. So we'll come back tomorrow, we'll check it out, and we may have to just touch up a few little areas with a palm sander, but it looks beautiful. I mean, to consider the condition of the porcelain tile that we went over and transform that to this, it's really a nice system. So once we get it all prepped, cleaned, and free of any trowel ridges or trowel lines, we'll go ahead and we'll talk about our sealer applications, starting with the AO3 water-based acrylic. Our Skraffino Superfine, which was tinted with putty Aquacolor, has dried for roughly 10 hours or the next day. So now it's time to demonstrate the next application, and that's going to be putting the Aquacolor down with the color walnut. Now, we did a nice job of putting the Superfine down yesterday. It's pretty much free of any trowel lines. However, if you did get some trowel ridges or trowel strokes, basically you'd want to sand it with a rotary buffing machine with the sanding screen somewhere around an 80 to a 150 grit. And the reason for the range is it really depends on the temperature. You know, obviously it's going to take longer for the Skraffino Superfine to set up if it's cooler, versus if it's much warmer, it's going to set up quicker. So that's why we give a range on the sanding grit. So if you look at the Duraamen color chart, basically this is their color chart for the Aquacolor water-based system. And if you're trying to achieve one of these colors, basically this 8-ounce bottle mixes into 1 gallon of water. Now that's if you're trying to achieve any of these colors, but it's perfectly acceptable to dilute the product or go a little bit more intense if you're going for a certain effect. So if you're going for highs and lows, one example would be put a diluted version of this, perhaps it's 4 to 1, and spray a lighter color then, and then go with the full strength, which is 8 ounces of this product, the Aquacolor, into 1 gallon of water, and then go back with a more concentrated version to get highs and lows. So it's a very versatile product. It gives you a lot of flexibility to create coloring effects. Like we've discussed in many of the Duraamen videos, it's really important to keep your surface clean. That's for that reason I have slip-on booties over my boots. We don't want to contaminate the surface prior to staining. So this is the Aquacolor. The color is walnut. Let me give it a good pump here. We do want to break the surface tension with a microfiber pad. So I'll show you that. The walnut Aquacolor has been down for 1 hour. It looks great. It's dry. So now it's time to move on with our application of AO3 water-based acrylic. On an actual project, it's really best to have 2 people applying the product, 1 person spraying while 1 person is back rolling. That way you minimize the chance of getting any dry lines or cold joints. Our AO3 has been down for 4 hours, just under actually 5 hours. You want to make sure that the AO3 water-based acrylic has had sufficient cure time. And now we're going to finish this panel off with our Purdue U45, which is a water-based polyurethane. This is a matte version, and the ratio is 4 to 1, 4 parts A to 1 part B. Since we're working in a small area, we are, we're making a smaller increment. So our A side over here, we have 600 mLs, and on our B side, I've just poured in 125 mLs, and that equals our 4 to 1 ratio. So when you go out, just like in past videos that we've discussed, you want to make sure that the surface is in fact clean. If you're out on the surface, the plastic slip-on booties to protect your feet and not contaminate the surface. And it is a good idea on this type of a product to double roll. So in other words, I'll roll it in one direction, and Chris will use a nice 18-inch wide roller, and he'll cross the direction perpendicular to the way I rolled, and back roll it, and that just lays it down and prevents getting unwanted roller marks.